startups basically take science and give it this cool new dimension, that's for sure. And 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 I think that startup life um, is appealing in some important ways. So if we slice life into parse it for a moment into things that are already known and have already been done, and things that haven't yet been created or have to be figured out. And much of the way what science does is always looking for those new things, but it trains you on the old things. Trains you on the old things. They give you experiments where they know the answer already. It's like a trick. You have to find the answer. It's like, but the answer's been in the history books for 50 years. Like, okay, it's a good experiential to do that, but it's kind of manipulative at its core. You know, if you were in a poetry class, you'd get to make something that's never been made before. It may suck, but it will do this. It's never been done before. I did something that's never been done. And you don't get to do that in science. In science, you do these escape rooms of sorts that have been planned out by master manipulators. And so I think that what science needs is more attention to the frontier and the things that need to be figured out and seen as flexible. Science itself, every scientific discovery is itself a discovery that what we thought before isn't quite true or is flat out wrong. Things were held as truths, and then we find out that they weren't. And in that crack is where a lot of things happen. A lot of conspiracy theories and all this kind of stuff. But people hold up scientific truth as if somehow that's going to be the truth forever, when in fact, most commonly, people find a new dimension to it. And it's, so what am I going to here? It's that there is opportunity, it's that there was the unknown, that there was risk, that there was thrill.
So the academics that we usually come into contact are mostly MBAs who come visit us. I usually start off my comments by telling the MBAs that they should drop out immediately and go do a business. And I follow that up by saying there's a big difference between reading a book about sex and actually doing it. So the challenge for making the transition from a science-based background into an entrepreneurial sort of milieu or environment is culture shock. Because a lot of what happens is you spend 30, 20, 30, 40% of your time doing science, and then 50, 60% of your time doing politics and figuring out, how to do requests for cash, right? Grant proposals and politics. And when you move over to the entrepreneur side, there's no structure. It's chaos, or it seems like chaos. There's no instruction booklet, right? And that kind of freaks people out. So for us, we try and help scientists become entrepreneurs by giving them a framework and not instructions, but a tool set to enable them to do what they really love doing, which is 60 to 70% of their time spent on science, and only 30% dealing with investors like me for the money side. You can't get away from money, but you'd much rather spend 20, 30% of your time looking for money than 60, 70% of the time. And the great thing about going to the entrepreneur side is there's no politics bullshit that you often see in a corporate environment or in an academic environment.
What is a startup doing? A startup is saying, take your science and put it in a business plasmid, where this business plasmid is suddenly all sorts of things could happen. It could succeed, it could fail. It's drama, it's adventure. And it takes science and it puts it in a world of adventure. And it is important to enjoy that adventure.
People who have no integrity, they start to give, Theranos and some of the others, they start to give startups a bad name. So the one thing that you always must do when you're doing a startup is don't lie, because you have no revenue, you have no sales, you have no brand, you have no product. You basically have like yourself there. And if you lose your integrity, you have nothing or less than nothing, right? So we always advise our companies, never lie. Now, it's okay to tell the best truth, but don't lie. And this has to do with the experience that your customers have. This has to do with your product. Now, sometimes we do experiments where we don't build it and then deliver it and see whether people want it. We actually experiment by showing people a product that does not yet exist and see if they click the buy button. Now, of course, if we take their money, we always give it back and say, usually we don't take their money, but we say, hey, we'll put you on the waiting list. So right now there's too much demand for our product, and we'll get back to you. But so that's not exactly lying. What that is running a short-term experiment where you are getting that information and data that you need. But when it comes to real customers, real investors, your co-founders and your team, integrity means telling the truth even when you're afraid. So we have something we call updates. We start off with practicing, so we do them weekly, and then we move to monthly. But an update is a key building block tool for entrepreneurs. And all it is, what happened that went well, what happened did not go well, what help do you need, right? And then the numbers, not too many numbers, one number that if you achieve that number, it defines success for your company. So if you hit that number, your company is successful. We have another supporting number that's a little bit more short-term in nature, and then some supporting metrics. So usually about 4 numbers, and that's it. But companies that are honest with themselves, honest with their teams, honest with the investors, and honest with the mentors and the people in their community, and hold themselves to it in good times and in bad, those are the entrepreneurs, what we call cockroaches, who are able to take all the failure that is intrinsic in doing a startup. Most people, who come from a numbers and data background, okay, this is very important for us because I focus on software and internet, is they focus on like what they spend all their day thinking about, okay? And what they're thinking about is all the shit that fucked up, right? And so they're spending all their time on that. And when they talk to an investor, they're like, blah, 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 like this is all the crap that's not working. Which is why another tool that we use is called a script, okay? So we're very data driven, okay? You cannot improve something that you cannot measure. And we have a script, and you write down the script and you follow the script, and you're not allowed to change what you say unless you change the script. And when you have a script, it reminds you that you're not supposed to talk about all the shit that went wrong unless they ask that question. What you're supposed to lead off with is what's going right and how you're, got a really unique, technically driven solution to a very large problem, and that you and your co-founders and your team are the right people to solve for that, right? And so again, tell the truth, tell the best truth. Think about it like dating, okay? So when you are going after someone that you're interested in, are you going to go up to them and tell them the 10 worst things about you? Hopefully not. And so start off with the good stuff. Don't worry, they'll figure out the bad stuff on their own. Everybody's got a story from the start, and it generally sucks. It's boring. It's horrible to listen to. Confusing. And usually it's a list of features in a product and a description of some sort of tech, right? And again, That's not going to get anybody a date, right? So you want to first start with the problem, and you want to have that audience, that person on the other side, feel the pain, like physically feel the pain. And then you want to follow that up with a solution that's like, wow, there needs to be surprise in there. Like, wow, I never thought that you could actually use, this technology to solve this problem, right? And then we talk a little bit, we have one sentence about, we, there are the best people in the world to solve for this. And then, of course, when you're pitching something, it's really hard to get the date or the investor or the meeting if you don't ask for the meeting. So you always have to ask for something. And if you follow this simple set of what's the problem, what's the solution, what's your attraction, or what's best about you, and then people always forget to ask. But if you don't ask, nobody's going to give it to you, right? Then that structure will build a framework that you can do to tell any story and to sell anything. And so you can use it to sell future employees or your co-founder. You can do it for investors. You can do it for clients and customers. You can do it for your spouse or your girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever, because they're also on your startup team with you, because they're going to have to put up with the fact that you're working 007, basically 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And they're your partner in that, because they're going to have to put up with your lack of physical and mental presence as you go through this wonderful journey. On the other side is that huge amount of joy that you get from not having to deal with all the political bullshit and the grant applications and all that other stuff, and actually, build something that really changes the world.
It's critically important, particularly for investors. And I think we've worked pretty hard on the Annika story. A lot of it has to do with Vishal's background and the fact that he had supply chain problems. But for myself, the story that I think resonates a lot is I'm older than the average entrepreneur, so I've seen kind of the whole spectrum of biotech as it became corporate. Because when I was in college, there was no biotech industry, And so the first professors that jumped ship and went into biotech were very brave, because at that time, if you were in biology and you went into industry, you were like somebody that did animal testing for a cosmetics company or something. It was considered something that the people who were not smart and couldn't make it in academia would go into industry. And the people that started the biotechnology revolution were the pioneers that changed all that. Now, a lot of the smartest people have companies. And if you're an academic, most of the time you're not doing nearly as well as the people that are going into some of these really cutting edge, either biomedical or other applications of biotech.
You have to relax. You have to be willing to beam. You have to be willing to connect, and you have to be willing to risk defeat, risk rejection. The way you say defray rejection is to understand, I could get out of this many different things. I could get the next meeting. I could get a term sheet. I could get an intro to another fund. I could get a good idea out of the conversation that's going to help me with my next conversation. There's all manner of ways you can have positive things that come from meetings. A term sheet should never be the goal of a meeting. A term sheet happens inevitably. That's how it actually happens. Like, that term sheet was usually coming for months, and just something finally made it happen because the connection was there. It's not that anybody ever said one magic thing and then they got the term sheet.
I'll tell you a story. When I used to come home as a small child and eat dinner with my parents at the dinner table, you get that question, you know, so what did you do today? And I would have to like explain, you know, what I did that day. And then my father would be like, okay, cool. So now tell me again and make it more interesting. Okay. So I got a lot of training as a young child. This is like when I was 6 or 7 on talking shit. I'm still doing it at the age of, well, I'm pretty old now. It's a skill. It can be learned. And you never, ever stop. Okay. It's an iterative, data-driven process. And I guarantee you'll have a return on it because once you have one story down, then you have a different story for different types of audience. And before you know it, you'll get that investment and you might even get a date.
And essentially, there are no great ideas. What there were good ones where people had the ability to make the best of it. In the world of venture, I'm not much of a fan of the mass media concept. The idea that, like, I think most communication in the world of business explaining and business pitching and fundraising of any sort is biased and distorted by the concept of a demo day or a YouTube pitch where all these investors see this one thing and they all react to that. In fact, that happens and it's public, and because it's public, people think that's what you're doing. But in fact, that's not how you fundraise from investors. You fundraise from investors in meetings with that investor, and eventually meetings with and the associates, and eventually with the partners. And everybody takes in information differently. Everybody, I think it's less about this great way you tell a story than being flexible and reading people and understanding this is a really technical person. I need to start with that. This person isn't technical. This person isn't technical at all. And he is self-conscious about it. And because he's self-conscious about it, he's going to start with a lot of technical questions, even though it's not what he really cares about, because he wants to show, because he's afraid I have to ask every technical question because he's not competent there. Two people both asking about the technical side for different reasons that need to hear it slightly differently. Other people, they need to hear about the business first when they get the shell of the business and they understand how it could make money. Now they want to go in and learn the technology. There's people who want to get to know, every investor has a way that they get comfortable with the risk. Equipping founders to tell stories is not about one story, one calcified, it's on Netflix, permanent version. It's the ability to do director's cuts on the fly based on how things are responding, who people are.